The heart monitor shrieked like a warning siren. Inside the cold, dim ICU, a small boy lay motionless under the harsh white lights. His skin was pale, lips cracked, and wires snaked from his fragile body to the machines that kept him alive. Around his bed stood a cluster of doctors, men and women in pristine white coats, whispering to each other with tight, frightened faces. "We don't know what's killing him," one doctor murmured, voice trembling. Across the room, Don Salvatore Rossi didn't move. In his black tailored suit, he stood like a carved statue, eyes locked on his 8-year-old son, Luca. His mere presence made the room colder. This was not a man anyone wanted to disappoint. Not the police, not rival families, and certainly not the 50 top medical specialists flown in from around the world to save his boy. "You're supposed to be the best," he said slowly, each word like the click of a gun being loaded. "And yet my son is dying." The lead neurologist wiped sweat from his forehead. We're running every test, sir. We've ruled out infection, tumors, metabolic conditions." "Excuses," Salvatore cut in, his voice like a knife sliding across glass. He turned his head slightly, and the group of doctors shrank back. "If my boy dies, you die with him." No one dared breathe. Outside the ICU, the hallway was a storm of flashing cameras and murmuring reporters. News vans crowded the hospital entrance. Rumors were spreading through the city like wildfire about the untouchable Mafia boss whose heir was slipping away, about the hospital locked down like a fortress, about 50 doctors failing against an invisible enemy, and yet, in the same hallway, a teenage girl quietly pushed a mop across the tiles. Kesha's sneakers were worn thin. Her cleaning cart squeaked with every turn. At 15, she blended into the walls, just another janitor's kid helping her mom on the night shift. No one noticed her. No one ever did. But she noticed everything. She saw the panic in the doctor's eyes when they thought no one was watching. She caught the way they flipped through charts with shaking hands, how one specialist tore off his gloves in frustration and muttered, "It doesn't make sense." She recognized the patterns. She always did. Kesha had grown up in these hospital halls, sneaking into the library after midnight, reading medical textbooks her mom didn't even understand the titles of. Her mind was sharp, curious, hungry. But to these people, she was invisible. A cleaner's daughter with a mop. Through the ICU window, she saw Luca's limp body. The boy was about her little brother's age. His hair had started falling out in clumps. His breathing was shallow. Monitors beeped like a slow, dying heartbeat. Inside, another doctor whispered to the group, "Organ failure is progressing. If we don't figure this out soon—" "Soon?" Salvatore hissed. "I gave you weeks. Now you have hours." He stormed out of the ICU. Security guards parted like the Red Sea. The cameras outside erupted into shouts as he appeared at the doors, surrounded by men in dark suits. His anger wasn't loud. It was deadly quiet, the kind that made grown men sweat. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner by the nurses' station, 3 senior doctors huddled together. Kesha paused nearby, pretending to mop, her ears straining. "This doesn't fit any known syndrome," one said. "We're missing something," another whispered. The third lowered his voice. "If we admit that, we're finished. 50 specialists and no answers? Our reputations would be destroyed." Kesha's hand tightened on the mop handle. "Missing something." The phrase echoed in her head. She replayed the symptoms she'd overheard. Neurological collapse, unexplained hair loss, organs shutting down. She'd read something like this once, buried deep in a toxicology chapter of an old book she wasn't supposed to be reading. Her heart thudded faster. Down the hallway, her mother called softly, "Kesha, come on! We still have 2 more floors." "Coming," Kesha replied, but her voice was distant. Her eyes were fixed on the group of doctors. Their expensive watches glinted under the fluorescent lights, their voices dripping with fear and pride. None of them saw her. None of them cared what the janitor's daughter thought. But deep inside, something stirred. A spark she couldn't ignore. She leaned the mop against the wall and glanced through the ICU window one last time. Luca's monitor beeped steadily, each sound like a countdown she couldn't stop hearing. She didn't have their degrees. She didn't have their titles, but she might have the answer they were all missing. Kesha froze as the doctor's words replayed in her mind. We're missing something. But if we admit that, we're finished. Her breath caught. A half-formed idea flickered in her mind like a match struck in darkness. She didn't fully grasp it yet, but she knew, somewhere deep inside, that she'd seen these signs before. And if she was right, the boy's time was running out. She stared down the hallway, her pulse quickening. The night felt heavier now, charged with something dangerous. For the first time, she wasn't just cleaning the floor. She was standing on the edge of a mystery that no one else seemed brave or humble enough to see. The mop water rippled. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed, and Kesha realized this was no ordinary night. The hospital library was silent, except for the soft rustle of pages. It was barely dawn. The sky outside still painted in deep blues. When Kesha slipped through the half-open door, hugging a stack of thick medical textbooks to her chest. They were far too advanced for her age. Dense volumes on toxicology, neurology, rare diseases. But she carried them like treasure. Her sneakers made no sound on the polished floor. This was her secret world, a place where no one noticed a janitor's daughter if she came early enough. She set the books down at her usual corner table, tucked behind a row of tall shelves. A single lamp cast a warm pool of light over the pages. Her fingers trembled with a mix of excitement and fear. If anyone found her here, reading what she wasn't supposed to understand, there'd be trouble. But she came anyway, every morning. As she opened a textbook, her mind drifted to a different kind of memory. A classroom, months ago. Top of the class again, her science teacher had said, looking down at her test paper with raised eyebrows. Have you ever thought about medical school, Kesha? She'd smiled shyly. Yes, sir, every day. The teacher's expression had softened, but there was pity in it too. You're brilliant, but scholarships are competitive, and, well, your family's situation. The words had lingered like a bruise. Back then, she'd gone home to a tiny apartment that smelled faintly of bleach and old cooking oil. Her mom, Marlene, worked double night shifts cleaning the hospital. She never complained, even when her hands cracked from chemicals. This is how we survive, she would say. You study. I'll clean. One day, you'll wear the white coat, not scrub after it. Those words became Kesha's fuel. While her mother mopped the endless halls, Kesha would sneak into this library, devouring medical books she barely understood at first. Bit by bit, it all started to make sense. Diseases, symptoms, obscure case studies. She didn't just memorize. She connected things. Patterns spoke to her. And now, Luca Rossi's mysterious illness had gripped the entire hospital. The boy who wouldn't wake up. 50 doctors failing, and yet, something in what she'd overheard didn't sit right. She opened her notebook, worn, edges frayed, and flipped to a fresh page. She began writing down everything she remembered from overheard conversations the night before. Neurological collapse, hair loss, organ failure, negative results for infection, tumors, autoimmune conditions. Through cracks in half-closed doors, she'd glimpsed charts on monitors while cleaning. She'd heard frustrated specialists muttering acronyms she quickly scribbled down. Now, in the quiet morning, she organized them into columns like she'd seen in diagnostic manuals. Her pencil tapped against the page as her brain worked. If it's not infection, not tumor, not genetic. She flipped through the toxicology volume, scanning lists of rare poisons and their effects. Some matched one or two symptoms, but one pattern nagged at her memory just out of reach. The library clock ticked. Outside, the first shifts of nurses started their rounds. Kesha worked faster. She remembered Luca's chart had an unusual lab reading in the metabolic panel. She hadn't been able to see the whole thing, but she'd caught a glimpse of something abnormal in the margins. She copied it from memory now, frowning. Something was off. The numbers didn't behave like a disease. They looked like damage, something done from the outside. Her pulse quickened. She leaned closer to the toxicology table. Hair loss? Neurological? Liver? Her eyes widened slightly. Could it be? She didn't finish the thought. Footsteps echoed down the hallway outside. Kesha froze, glancing at the door. No one usually came in this early. She stacked her books, trying to look like she belonged. But she didn't. A janitor's kid with stolen textbooks was an easy target. She pushed through the last few lines in her notebook, copying a set of lab results she'd jotted hastily the night before. Her handwriting was messy from rushing. The door creaked open. A tall woman in crisp white walked in, the senior night nurse. Sharp eyes. No warmth. Kesha ducked her head, pretending to pack up. But the nurse noticed the notebook. She walked straight to the table, heels clicking like gunshots. "What's that?" Kesha clutched the notebook closer. "Just notes." The nurse's hand shot out, snatching the paper before Kesha could react. Her eyes scanned the page. Medical terms, lab values, toxicology references. Her brow furrowed. "What do you think you're doing, janitor's kid?" she hissed, voice low and dangerous. "Playing doctor?" Kesha's throat went dry. I was just... This is confidential information." The nurse's face hardened. "You've crossed a line. I should report you right now." She held the notebook high, as if deciding whether to crush Kesha's dreams in that moment. The library suddenly felt smaller, colder. Kesha's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd always walked the line between invisibility and discovery. And now she'd been seen, but not for her brilliance. For her trespass. The nurse leaned closer. "One word from me, and you and your mama are out of this hospital for good." Kesha's hands trembled. Her future hung in the balance, and the morning light creeping through the window felt like a spotlight she couldn't escape. The nurse narrowed her eyes. "So tell me, what exactly were you doing with these?" Kesha opened her mouth, but no words came out. The ICU hallway buzzed with false confidence that morning. Kesha pushed her cleaning cart beside her mother, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. Just beyond the glass doors, a crowd of specialists gathered around Luca Rossi's bed for morning rounds. Their expensive watches flashed under the bright fluorescent lights. Their voices carried the sharp, clipped rhythm of men who were used to being obeyed. "Based on the latest scans, we believe this is an atypical metabolic disorder," one of them declared, tapping a tablet like a judge handing down a verdict. Another chimed in, "We'll adjust the supportive care and hope the body stabilizes. There's still a chance." Kesha's mother kept her head down, wiping baseboards near the ICU wall. But Kesha listened, eyes narrowed. She'd memorized Luca's symptoms, reviewed his labs, spent the entire night replaying every clue. And what she heard now wasn't brilliance. It was desperation, dressed in authority. She swallowed hard. Her heart thumped. She knew she shouldn't get involved. People like her didn't speak in rooms like this. But a spark of courage, small but insistent, pushed through her fear. She stepped closer. "Excuse me, Dr. Aldrich." The lead physician turned slowly. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of icy confidence that crushed dissent without needing to raise his voice. His gaze landed on her blue janitorial uniform. "Yes?" Kesha's voice wavered, but she forced herself to speak. I think you should consider low-level heavy metal poisoning. Some of the symptoms, they match, especially the neurological collapse and hair loss." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then Aldrich threw his head back and laughed. "Not kindly, mocking, heavy metal poisoning?" he repeated, loud enough for everyone to hear. "From you?" He gestured at her mop bucket. "Stick to mopping floors, young lady. Medicine is a little more complicated than what you pick up cleaning charts." A few of the doctors smirked, One rolled his eyes. Kesha's cheeks burned hot. Her throat tightened as humiliation pressed down on her like a weight. But not everyone laughed. A younger resident near the back, a man barely in his late 20s, glanced at her notebook sticking out of her pocket. His brow furrowed. He leaned toward Aldridge. Actually, some of the labs could fit that profile. Maybe we should— Enough, Aldridge snapped. His voice cut through the air like a scalpel. We don't take diagnostic suggestions from janitors. We are dealing with a critical case, not a classroom game. The young resident fell silent immediately, shrinking back under his superior's glare. Kesha wanted to disappear. She backed away, heart pounding, gripping the handle of the cleaning cart like it was the only solid thing in the room. Her mother shot her a warning look, equal parts worry and fear. Don't, her eyes said. Not here. Not with them. Inside the ICU, Luca's monitor suddenly beeped faster. One of the nurses rushed to adjust the ventilator settings. Another checked his pupils. He's slipping deeper, someone whispered. His small body looked even smaller against the tangle of tubes and wires. His breaths were shallow, his skin almost translucent. Dr. Aldridge slammed a file shut. I want results by tonight, he barked. If we don't have a definitive diagnosis by midnight, this hospital will face more than bad press. Don Salvatore won't tolerate failure. As if summoned by his name, the Mafia boss appeared at the ICU doors moments later. He moved like a storm. Dark suit, dark eyes, silent fury radiating from every step. I gave you time, he said softly, almost gently, but the menace beneath was unmistakable. Midnight. No excuses, the lead doctor nodded stiffly. We're doing everything medically possible. Sir, Salvatore's gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Kesha. For an instant, she felt pinned in place, as if he could see through her fear and straight into the dangerous thought forming in her mind. Then he turned and walked away, flanked by his men. The room exhaled once he was gone. Hours later, when the doctors cleared out for lunch and the halls quieted, Kesha lingered near the nurse's station. She pulled out her notebook and spread out the lab results she'd memorized, scribbling them onto the page line by line. Her pulse quickened as she cross-checked values from memory. There it was again. The odd marker on the metabolic panel, the unexplained drop in potassium, the neurological signs, hair loss. The puzzle was staring them in the face, and they were too proud to see it. Her finger traced a line down the toxicology column she'd studied earlier that morning. A single word jumped out at her like a flash of lightning. Thallium. She froze. Her breath caught. Thallium poisoning matched almost everything. Hair loss, neurological collapse, organ failure, and it was notoriously easy to miss in standard tests. Her hands trembled. They missed it, she whispered. She flipped back through her notes, desperate to find any discrepancy, any chance she was wrong. But the pattern was too clear. The overlooked test result practically screamed it. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, casting long shadows across the floor. The hallway was empty except for her and her cart. If she was right, Luca wasn't dying of a mystery disease. He was being poisoned, and no one was listening. The ICU erupted in chaos just before dawn. Luca's heart monitor shrieked, its jagged beeps slicing through the stillness like gunshots. Nurses rushed in from every direction, their shoes squeaking against the polished floor. One shouted, "Blood pressure dropping! Rapidly!" Another fumbled with the ventilator tubing. Alarms layered over alarms. Kesha was mopping 2 hallways down when she heard the sound. She didn't need to be told what it meant. She had learned to read panic in footsteps and voices long ago. She dropped the mop, heart hammering, and ran. Through the ICU doors, she saw the boy's pale face. His skin had taken on a waxy gray tint, his eyelids fluttering weakly. The monitors flashed red warnings. Dr. Aldridge barked orders like a commander under siege. Increase vasopressors. Push fluids. Get neurology back on the line, now! Doctor, his liver enzymes just spiked again. This doesn't fit the current diagnosis. A resident stammered. Then make it fit, Aldridge snapped. Kesha stood frozen against the wall, her notebook pressed to her chest. She knew. The answer was right there. But no one would listen to her word over theirs, unless she gave them something they couldn't ignore. She turned and sprinted down the hall toward the pathology lab. The lab was dim, quiet, and empty at this hour. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her. Dust motes floated in the air like suspended time. Her eyes scanned the shelves. Rows upon rows of outdated reference books and toxicology manuals stacked like forgotten relics. She grabbed one thick, green-bound volume from the shelf. Toxic Agents and Rare Poisons. Volred 2. Her fingers flipped through the pages feverishly. There it was. Thallium. Symptoms. Hair loss. Neurological collapse. Organ failure. Delayed onset. Easy to miss in routine screenings. Requires specific test. Prognosis. Fatal without prompt antidote. Prussian blue. Her pulse raced. Everything matched Luca's mysterious decline. Everything. She jumped onto a nearby terminal. She'd discovered months ago that the hospital's guest Wi-Fi and shared logins could be exploited. She'd watched IT staff long enough to memorize the override password. Within minutes, she was in. She typed thallium poisoning case reports into a medical database. Dozens of obscure studies popped up. One from Prague, one from Seoul, one from a small American town in the 1980s. Every single case mirrored Luca's symptoms. Normal imaging, neurological deterioration, alopecia, rapid organ failure. Kesha's eyes widened. "This is it," she whispered. There was no more time to wait. She shoved the manual under her arm, printed the clearest case summary she could, and ran. Back in the ICU, the scene was worse. Luca's oxygen saturation was plummeting. Nurses moved with grim efficiency. Someone whispered, "If this continues for another hour, he won't make it." Kesha burst through the doors, panting. "Stop!" Heads whipped toward her. She stood there, flushed and breathless, clutching papers and a dusty book like a warrior brandishing evidence. Dr. Aldridge's face darkened. "Not you again," she ignored him. "Run a thallium-specific test. Right now, he's been poisoned. It fits. Neurological collapse, hair loss, organ failure, the delayed onset. Regular toxicology screens don't catch it. You need a thallium panel and Prussian blue antidote." The room fell into stunned silence for half a second, just long enough for Aldridge to recover and sneer. "Security," he said flatly. "Remove her from the ICU immediately." Two orderlies stepped forward. Kesha backed up, holding out the printout like a shield. "I'm not guessing. I have case studies, 3 of them, exact match. You don't have time to argue. If you don't test now, he'll be dead before sunrise." Aldridge's voice rose, sharp and furious. "This is a hospital, not a playground for janitors' children. If you interrupt this again, I'll have you banned permanently." And then, like a sudden drop in temperature, another voice cut through the shouting. "Let her speak." The ICU door opened. Don Salvatore Rossi walked in slowly, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He'd been alerted by the alarms. His presence changed the air itself. Doctors stiffened. Nurses lowered their eyes. Even Aldridge fell silent. Salvatore's gaze locked onto Kesha. He didn't blink. "Explain," he said simply. Her knees nearly buckled under the weight of his attention, but she forced herself to stand taller. "Your son's symptoms don't match what they're treating," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I studied his lab values. There's a marker everyone missed. It's thallium poisoning. Regular screens can't detect it. You need a targeted test. If I'm right, there's an antidote. But if you keep wasting time on the wrong diagnosis, he'll die." No one breathed. Dr. Aldridge stammered. "Sir, This is absurd. She's a cleaning girl. We can't base critical care on... Salvatore raised one finger. Aldridge froze mid-sentence. He stepped closer to Kesha, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the cold precision in his eyes. "If you're wrong," he said quietly, "you die with them." Kesha's heart slammed against her ribs, but she didn't back away. "Then run the test," she whispered. For a long moment, silence stretched like a drawn wire. Then Don Salvatore turned to Aldridge and snapped his fingers. "Run the test," the doctor scrambled instantly, barking new orders. Technicians ran for blood samples. The ICU flipped from panic to high-stakes action in seconds. Kesha stood there, shaking, but alive. And for the first time, people weren't ignoring her. They were listening. Cliffhanger. The test was being prepared. If she was right, Luca's life might be saved. If she was wrong, she'd signed her own death warrant. In the sterile chill of the toxicology lab, time moved like a ticking bomb. Technicians in white coats rushed between machines, their movements brisk and nervous under Don Salvatore's unblinking gaze. His presence was silent but suffocating. A lion watching prey. Two bodyguards stood at the door, ensuring no one left until the truth was unearthed. A blood sample from Luca lay in a tray, ready. One technician's hands shook as he loaded it into the analyzer. The machine beeped, lights flashing as it began its rapid sequence. Dr. Aldridge hovered nearby, his jaw clenched tight. He tried to project control, but sweat collected at his temple. "It's just a precaution," he muttered to no one in particular. Of formality. Kesha stood at the far corner, clutching the same dusty toxicology manual to her chest. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Every heartbeat, every glance in her direction said it all. If she's wrong, it ends here. The machine's beeping slowed. A single technician stepped forward, eyes scanning the results. His face drained of color. He looked at Aldridge, then at Salvatore. "Sir, it's positive," he whispered. "Thallium levels are extremely high." A stunned silence fell. Then, chaos. "Impossible." Aldridge barked, snatching the printout from the technician. His eyes darted across the numbers. They didn't lie. How could we have missed this? Don Salvatore's gaze turned to Kesha. He didn't smile, but something softened in his eyes. He nodded once, small, deliberate. "La piccola dottoressa," he murmured. "The little doctor." Within minutes, orders flew like gunfire. "Get the antidote. Prussian blue, stat. Notify ICU. Prep IV line." The antidote was rushed into Luca's room. A nurse injected the dark antidote fluid into his IV, while machines beeped steadily. The entire ICU held its breath. Minutes ticked by. Then something shifted. Luca's heart rate steadied. His oxygen levels climbed. His blood pressure, once collapsing, began to normalize. Nurses exchanged looks of disbelief. "His liver values are stabilizing," one whispered. "It's working," another murmured, eyes wide. Hours later, the boy's once ashen face showed a hint of warmth. His small chest rose and fell with newfound strength. For the first time in weeks, the monitors played a calm, rhythmic song. Outside, word had spread like wildfire. Reporters swarmed the hospital gates, cameras flashing, shouting questions. Is it true the Mafia boss's son has recovered? Who solved the case? Was it really a cleaning girl? Inside, the doctors scrambled to rewrite their narrative. Dr. Aldridge called emergency conferences. "We were following standard protocols," he insisted to the press team. This was a rare toxin, easily missed in early screenings. "We acted swiftly once it was identified." But everyone knew the truth. It wasn't them who found it. It was the girl no one saw. Kesha stood quietly by the doorway of the ICU, watching Luca's monitors. She didn't care about cameras or praise. She only cared that the boy lived. She'd done what 50 doctors couldn't. Don Salvatore approached her slowly. Nurses and doctors parted like the sea. He stopped in front of her, towering, yet strangely calm. He spoke softly, but his words carried weight. "You saved my son when they could not?" Kesha swallowed hard. "I just saw what they missed." He nodded. "La piccola dottoressa," he repeated, this time loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The words rolled through the ICU like a royal decree. Every doctor in the room felt the sting of humiliation. Aldridge stared at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. The younger resident, the one who'd whispered she might be right, gave her a small, proud smile. Vindication washed over her in quiet waves. For once, her voice had mattered. But as the adrenaline ebbed, something else caught her attention. While tidying near the nurse's station, her eyes fell on a stack of old patient charts waiting to be archived. One file lay slightly open on top, belonging to a child around Luca's age. She skimmed the notes. Unexplained neurological collapse, hair loss, rapid organ failure. Same symptoms. Her pulse quickened. She flipped through the lab reports. No thallium test. The final note froze her in place. Patient deceased. Cause undetermined. Someone else had suffered the same mysterious fate, and no one had found it in time. Kesha's breath hitched. The victory she'd just felt dimmed under a new, colder realization. This wasn't an isolated case. As outside the press screamed for answers and the ICU celebrated Luca's turnaround, Kesha stood alone with the file in her hands. Her eyes narrowed. Something bigger was hiding beneath the surface, and she had just pulled on the first loose thread. The hospital at night felt like another world. Hushed, hollow, haunted by the echoes of daytime chaos. Fluorescent lights hummed above as Kesha crept down the hallway, clutching 2 patient charts tight against her chest. Her heart pounded like a warning drum. 2 children. Same symptoms, same undiagnosed cause, both treated by the same hospital. And one almost died. Her gut twisted. This wasn't a mistake. It felt like a pattern. She slipped past the nurse's station, careful to keep to the edges of the hall where the shadows were thick. The cleaning crew wouldn't arrive for another hour. The corridors were deserted. She swiped her mother's spare badge across the records room lock. A faint click. She eased the door open and slipped inside. The air was stale with the scent of paper and old ink. Rows of steel cabinets lined the room, each stuffed with files stretching back years. She flicked on a small desk lamp, its warm glow carving a small circle in the dark. She pulled charts, one after another. Children, all from wealthy families. All had entered the hospital healthy, suddenly collapsed with neurological failure, then died within weeks. Different wards, different excuses, but one detail stayed the same. Every single one had been under the care of Dr. Jonathan Green. Dr. Green, the hospital's star pediatrician. He was beloved by the media, trusted by families, worshipped by interns. He smiled on every poster in the lobby, the perfect image of compassion. Kesha's hands began to shake as she spread the files across the desk. "No," she whispered. "This can't be." The dates lined up, the symptoms matched, and the test results. They'd never run toxicology. Not once. Her stomach turned cold. Just as she was about to copy the patient IDs into her notebook, she heard footsteps approaching. Heavy, confident. She froze, switching off the lamp. The door opened a crack. Through the sliver of light she saw him, Dr. Green, tall, immaculately dressed, his white coat buttoned with surgical precision, and on his face, that same charming smile that made parents trust him instantly. Only now, in the dim light, it looked wrong, like a mask stretched over something darker. He stepped inside, scanning the room briefly. Then, as if satisfied, he closed the door again and walked down the hall. Kesha's lungs burned. She'd been holding her breath. She waited 30 long seconds before slipping out the opposite exit, sticking to the shadows until she reached the staff stairwell. Halfway down, she heard murmurs from a side hallway. Green's voice, low but clear. The schedule changed. We can't wait another week. The family is leaving town, another voice answered. The hospital pharmacist. You're sure no one suspects? Of course not, Green replied with a light laugh. They never do. They look at me and see a savior. Kesha pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing, her hands clenched into fists. She risked a glance around the corner. Her fingers brushed against a panel at the back of the cabinet. Loose. She pulled gently. A small hidden compartment opened. Inside, under a folded lab coat, lay a vial. She lifted it into the light. A white label, faded but clear. Thallium sulfate. Her breath caught in her throat. He wasn't just negligent. He was doing this on purpose. She stuffed the vial into her pocket, heart pounding so loudly it filled the silence. But just as she turned to leave, a faint click echoed in the hallway. Footsteps approaching. She froze, the vial cold against her palm. The morning sun poured through the hospital's glass atrium, but the usual warmth was gone. A different kind of tension simmered in the air. Thick, watchful, dangerous. Dr. Jonathan Green stood in front of the security monitor room, hands folded behind his back. His signature smile was gone, replaced by a hard, predatory stare. On the screen, grainy black-and-white footage showed a slim figure slipping into his office late last night. The camera caught only a partial profile as the person moved through the shadows. Green leaned closer. The figure turned briefly toward the light. Kesha. His eyes narrowed, cold and calculating. So, he murmured, voice smooth as silk over broken glass. The little genius wants to play detective. Within an hour, the hospital was buzzing. A whispered rumor moved through staff like static. Someone broke into Dr. Green's office. Security officers found her mopping near the ICU. Kesha Johnson, one barked. Come with us, she looked up, startled. What's wrong? They didn't answer. They grabbed her arms, not roughly, but firmly, and marched her through the hallways as nurses and doctors turned to stare. Whispers rose around her. When they shoved her into the security room, Green was waiting. The smile was back now, but different. Tight, sharp, almost mocking. Beside him stood Dr. Aldridge, arms crossed, his face a mask of righteous indignation. Green spoke first. I'm very disappointed, he said smoothly. After all we tolerated, and to think. Theft. What? She breathed. He pointed to the grainy video. You entered my office after hours. A vial is missing. A toxic substance, no less. He shook his head slowly. You could have endangered lives. That's not true, she shot back. You, Aldridge cut her off sharply. You've overstepped enough. First, you disrupt medical procedure. Then you accuse respected physicians of incompetence. Now this? His voice was cold. Security will handle this. Possibly the police. Fear coiled in her stomach, but she forced herself to stand taller. I wasn't stealing, she said, voice trembling but steady. I was looking for proof. The door opened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Don Salvatore Rossi entered, flanked by 2 bodyguards. His tailored black suit contrasted sharply with the sterile white walls. His presence froze everyone in place. Behind him, Luca followed slowly in a wheelchair, pale but awake, alive. The Mafia boss didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I hear, he said slowly, that someone saved my son. His eyes flicked to Kesha. And someone accuses her of stealing. No one moved. Salvatore took a seat, as if it were his court. We'll hear her side first. Kesha's heart pounded, but she stepped forward. She held up the folder she'd copied from the records room. There were other kids, she began. All from rich families. All with the same symptoms Luca had. They were treated by Dr. Green. None of them were tested for thallium. They died. Murmurs rippled through the room. Nurses exchanged uneasy looks. She turned to Green. I saw you last night. with the pharmacist. You gave him something to destroy. And I found a vial in your office labeled thallium sulfate. Gasps filled the room. Green laughed lightly, but the sound was brittle. She's making things up, he said. A frightened child inventing stories after being caught breaking into a doctor's office. I should have expected this. She's lying, Aldridge added quickly, desperate to protect herself. But for the first time, Green's mask cracked. Just a flicker. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing slightly. Kesha saw it. So did someone else. The young resident stood at the back, pale and trembling. He'd said nothing as accusations flew, but now his voice broke the tension. She's not lying. All heads turned toward him. He swallowed hard. I saw the charts, the symptoms. She's right. It's all the same. And last night, Green met with the pharmacist. I saw them too. The silence that followed was electric. Green's perfect image began to fray. Don Salvatore leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. Dr. Green, he said softly, my son would be dead, if not for this girl. Now she stands here, accused by you. I don't like that. Sweat dotted Green's forehead. This is absurd, he hissed. You're taking the word of enough, Salvatore cut in, voice like steel. A nurse slipped quietly from the room. Someone else picked up the phone to call the police. The walls were closing in. For the first time, Green's confident mask fully shattered. His hands twitched. His eyes darted toward the hallway. Then, he bolted. He shoved past the nearest guard and sprinted down the corridor, startling bystanders. "Stop him!" someone shouted. Security officers stumbled to react. Kesha ran to the door just in time to see him disappear around the corner, his white coat billowing like a ghost. The alarms sounded a moment later. Dr. Jonathan Green was on the run. The night sky blazed with red and blue. Sirens wailed through the streets, slicing through the hum of the city like knives. Kesha pressed her face against the hospital window, watching as squad cars screeched around the corner. A helicopter's searchlight swept across the parking lot like a hungry eye. Down below, 2 officers tackled a figure in a white coat, trying to vault over a fence. Dr. Jonathan Green hit the pavement hard. Within minutes, they dragged him toward a waiting police car. His carefully constructed mask of charm and prestige had crumbled entirely. His hair was disheveled, his face slick with sweat, his eyes wide and feral. From his bag, officers pulled out forged passports, stacks of foreign currency, and a vial wrapped in gauze. The hospital's staff gathered at the windows and balconies, watching in stunned silence as one of their most respected pediatricians was cuffed like a common criminal. The truth was out. The interrogation the next morning. The precinct's interrogation room was filled with a suffocating stillness. Green sat slouched in a chair, his hands cuffed, his face pale. Across from him, 2 detectives methodically laid out photos and documents on the table. The toxicology reports, hospital charts, security footage, the intercepted emails. "You can make this easy," one detective said calmly. At first, Green sneered and denied everything. But hours later, cornered by the mountain of evidence and the betrayal of his own pharmacist accomplice, his voice broke. Words tumbled out. He confessed. It wasn't just him. Green had been part of a network, a quiet, calculated scheme that targeted the heirs of powerful families. They would subtly poison wealthy children, drive families into panic, and then, miraculously, offer the right treatment. For a price. In some cases, they simply allowed the children to die, creating fear and leverage in elite circles. It was money. It was influence. It was control. But Kesha had noticed what no one else did. And that single observation, a janitor's daughter connecting the dots that seasoned doctors ignored, had blown open a scandal that reached far beyond the hospital. Walls. The aftermath within a week. Arrests spread like wildfire. The pharmacist, a lab technician who had been falsifying test results. a senior administrator who'd looked the other way in exchange for kickbacks. The media swarmed the hospital. Reporters clustered outside the gates. Headlines blared across every screen. Teen cleaner exposes poisoning ring. Chase. Hospital hero, unsung genius saves Mafia heir. Kesha Johnson, the girl who changed everything. Cameras flashed when Kesha and her mother emerged from their small apartment one morning. A reporter shouted, "How did you figure it out?" Kesha blinked under the lights, clutching her backpack. "I just paid attention," she said softly. "Sometimes the truth is right there. You just have to look." A life transformed. A week later, in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, Don Salvatore Rossi met with Kesha and her mother. No guards, no grand display, just him in a dark suit, a simple briefcase on the table. "My son is alive because of you," he said. His voice, usually gravelly and commanding, held something softer now. "The world saw a janitor's daughter. I saw a doctor." He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a full scholarship, tuition, living expenses, books, for medical school. Not just any school, one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Kesha's hands trembled. I can't accept this," she whispered. "Yes," her mother said firmly, eyes glistening. "You can. You will." Tears welled in her mom's eyes as she turned to her daughter. "I scrubbed floors so you wouldn't have to. You always were meant for more, baby." The three of them sat there in silence, an unlikely trio bound by tragedy, courage, and a choice that changed everything. The first day months later, autumn leaves swirled across the university courtyard. Kesha stood at the base of the medical school's grand stone staircase, clutching a brand-new backpack. Her hair was neatly tied back, her clothes crisp, her ID badge glinting in the sunlight. Students streamed past her, some laughing, some hurrying, but for a moment she stood still, breathing it all in. She remembered pushing mop buckets through sterile halls, listening outside doors where no one thought she belonged, fighting to be heard. And now, here she was. She lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and climbed the steps.